Hello and welcome to the part 3 of creating your first trigger. In this part, we are actually going to create our trigger. In part 2, we created a trigger function and we called it was called log last underscore name changes. And basically this is the code I used for the creation of the trigger function. The function basically is going to check if the last name of the employee changes. If it changes, it will insert the old last name, okay, into this table called employee audits. It will also insert the ID, employee ID, the last name, and the time of the change. It will log that into this table called employees audit. So that's what we created in our part 2. Now let's go ahead and create the trigger. So we are going to create the trigger on the employees table. So this is the trigger function. So now we have to locate the table. This is the tables. We need to look for the employees table. So this is the employee audit. We want the employees table. If you expand the employees table, there's an option for triggers. So you can see there's no triggers at the moment. So I'm going to right click and go create trigger. All right. So we just wait for it to fetch some information. So we need to give the trigger a name. So I've given the trigger a name called last underscore name underscore changes. Always good to give your trigger relevant names. Next, move on to, you can place a comment if you wish to do so. So let's click on the definition. And for the definition, it says, is this a row trigger? Yes, we are applying the trigger to a row. I'm going to leave this option for the constraint blank and deferrable blank, deferred. Basically, these are all self-explanatory. Trigger function, we already created the trigger function, so we need to pick that up. So click on the drop down and it tells you this is our trigger, log last underscore name changes. That's the name of the trigger, and then any arguments. And let's move on to the next tab, the events. So basically these are the events, so you can select whatever event is going to trigger. So the event we want to be triggered is an update. So for example, when a record is updated, we want the trigger to be fired. And we don't want it to be fired. We don't want it to be fired before. We want it to be fired after the update has happened. Say for example, if an employee gets married and changes her name, obviously she's going to update her name. When that name gets updated, we want the trigger to be fired. So we want it to happen after this event takes place. So that's it. Once you've done that, just click on save and that should create the trigger. You can see the trigger has now been created. So this is basically the script that I just created using the PG admin tool. So this is basically the same thing. I just wanted to show you the script version of it. So basically what this will do, this is going to bind the trigger function to the employees table. We've already specified the trigger name, which is called log underscore last name changes, and is going to happen when a column is updated. The trigger function will automatically be invoked into the log changes. Okay, we've got a table called audit log, so it's going to log the changes into that. Okay, so we've got our trigger now set up. So in order to test this, we need to insert some sample data into the table. So I'm just going to run a quick query on the table so that we can see that the table is actually empty. And and this, you can see here the table is empty. There's no rows at the moment. So I'm going to insert a couple of rows into the table. Okay, so this is a query. This is my insert statement. I'm going to insert 2 rows here. The first one will be for a chap called John Doe. Second one will be for a lady called Jane Bluelime. So let's highlight that, and that should insert 2 rows into the table. Okay, we've got some errors here. So the reason why I had an error was because I left out one of the columns here. Notice I've got 3 columns in that field. So now I've now added an ID, and you can see I've already inserted this record. So if I run this now, you would see it has 1 record. You can see I've inserted John Doe. So what I need to do now is do the same for here. I'll just come here and type in the ID column and put a comma there and a space. And here I will just insert the number 2 to include. I'm just manually assigning IDs to the rows here. So let me execute this, and that will give me record number 2. So you can see now that's been inserted. So if I run the table again, I should have 2 records. All right. So this is just, I'm just doing basic insert here just to illustrate how the trigger works. Ideally, in a normal way, this ID column should assign automatically when you insert, but I've done it manually. Okay, now we have 2 records. So let's assume this lady here called Jane got married and has come back to us to say she's married. So now we need to update her details to her married name. Okay, so I now have an update statement. So remember, her current name is Jane Bluelime. So I'm saying I'm updating the employees table. I'm setting the last name to equals to Brown, where the ID is equals to 2. You can see the ID here is equals to 2. So it's going to change this lady's name, Jane, change the last name from Bluelime to Brown. So let me run this statement and execute that. Hopefully everything should, okay, I got an error. I want to know why. The reason why we're experiencing some issues, you know, when we created the table and when we inserted the values, we manually set a value for the column ID. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete both tables and set the table up again, this time using an automatic ID insertion. So I'm going to delete the 2 tables we created, the employees audit and employees as well. What that means is that inside the employees, I've got a trigger. That means I'm going to have to recreate this trigger here. Okay. So I'm going to right click and go delete or drop table, and that will get rid of that table. And I'll do the same for the employees audit, and I'll drop that table. Okay, so I've got both tables dropped. That means I'll need to recreate the trigger. The function, trigger function, is okay. I've already created it. Sorry about this. That means this lecture is going to go on a bit longer. But hopefully that should solve the problem. So let's recreate the table. This is the first table, employees table. What has changed here is this serial here. This is what will give it an automatic numbering. So I'm going to highlight that and execute. Hopefully that should create okay. So that's created that table. I'll do the same. I'll do the same for this table here. I'll right click, select all and click on that. So we've now created both tables. So now the tables have been created. If I refresh my table list, both tables should be there now. I've got the employee audit and employees. Now I can reinsert the sample data. Okay, so I'm inserting some sample data here. So I'm just going to highlight both and execute, and that should create, you can see it's created the rows. You can see here I've not used the ID because of the automatic numbering we set up when I recreated the tables. So this table now should now have 2 rows. So what I need to do now is go back to the table and recreate the trigger. So I right click on the employees table, expand that, and there should be an option for trigger. So I'll just expand, right click, I'll create the trigger, wait for it to populate. I'll give the trigger a name. So I've given the trigger a name, same name as before. I'll click on the definition. So it's going to be a row trigger. I say yes. I'll leave all this. That should be okay. Everything should be set. Click on event. The event I want is going to be an update. This is when I want the trigger to fire. When there's an update, I'll just go to the definition. I need to select a trigger function. Click on the drop down. This is the trigger function we created earlier. So we've got the event. So it will trigger after. I'll put after an update, not before. So that's it. I'll click save. And so we've got our trigger now set up. All right. So I'm going to quickly do a quick query on the table and just make sure we've got something in there. You can see we've inserted 2 rows because of the automatic numbering. You can see it's automatically inserted the number row. So now Jane, let's assume Jane has got married. So we're going to update her last name. Hopefully that should trigger a set of the trigger. So I've added this query here. So we assume that Jane got married and her last name is now Brown. So we're going to update this. So where the ID is 2, which is this, and that should fire off the trigger. So I'll select that and click on that. You can see the query has returned successfully. So that means recreating the table has helped because of the automatic numbering. So now the trigger should have worked because we've done an update statement. Remember, triggers are automatically fired. So what I expect the trigger to have logged that information into the audit, employee underscore audit. So let's do a quick query on the employees underscore audit. Employee, let's take out the S. So it'll be audits. Let's do a quick check on that. Yep. Run that table. We should have something in there if everything's worked okay. Excellent. So you can see here is logged the ID, the employee, the last name. This was the old last name, and it tells you when it was changed. You can see the trigger has worked and it fired off the code automatically. So that is really good. Really pleased about that. So the issue we had earlier was because of the automatic numbering. So we have successfully created our trigger now and also tested the trigger. Thank you so much for watching. Apologies, it's taking quite long. If you do have any issues, please let me know. Take care and bye for now.